Welcome to Satsang Conversations, where we journey across the world to the serene and sacred spaces of BAPS Mandirs. This podcast is your gateway to exploring profound spiritual lessons that echo through time, yet remain incredibly relevant to our everyday lives. Each episode brings heartfelt discussions, wisdom, and insights that help us navigate the challenges of modern life with a deeper sense of peace, purpose, and connection. So whether you're seeking inspiration, solace, or a spark to light up your spiritual path, join us as we dive into conversations that uplift the soul and enrich the heart.
Yes, and everybody. Today we want to talk about the Satsang Diksha. Mahan Swami Maharaj, who is the sixth spiritual successor of Bhagavan Swaminarayan, he wrote this scripture, and it's basically a concise summary of the spiritual principles and the spiritual philosophy and the spiritual endeavors, the sadhanas that have been propagated by Bhagavan Swaminarayan and the entire Guru Parampara. And this scripture that he's written, it's basically a scripture that deals with how to become happy and blissful and peaceful in life. And in fact, in the first shlok, he writes, "May Swaminarayan Bhagavan, who is Akshar Purushottam Maharaj himself, bestow ultimate peace, bliss, and happiness on all." And what's intriguing is that the very last shlok, which is shlok number 315, he writes almost practically the same thing. He says, "May Swaminarayan Bhagavan, who is Akshar Purushottam Maharaj himself, spread supreme bliss and auspiciousness throughout the entire world." So we kind of know from this, from these two shloks, the first and the very last shlok, that the goal behind writing this scripture is that everyone who reads this scripture and everyone who tries to abide by the philosophy and the principles and the different shloks in this scripture is to attain that happiness. Every shlok in between, like between the first and last shlok, the goal behind every shlok is to attain that happiness and that bliss, that shanti, that everyone actually wants. Everybody wants to be happy, right? And I think particularly I want to kind of focus on shlok number 18 and 19, right? In shlok number 18 and 19, he writes, "To offer singular, resolute, and supreme devotion to Bhagavan Swaminarayan, one should receive the Ashray Diksha mantra and affiliate with this satsang." So what is...
I think we're focusing on this shlok particularly now more so because we're all saying it before we start the arti to remind ourselves of this particular mindset we need to cultivate as we're doing arti, but I think also all throughout the day when we are going about our routine life.
Yeah, I think recently Mahan Swami Maharaj, he has given the agna, or he has given us all the guidance that before we do arti, we should say the Ashray Diksha mantra, right? So it basically refers to a specific mantra which is recited when one takes refuge in satsang, right? So it's an official mantra, and it goes Dhanyosmi, Purnakamosmi, Nishpapo, Nirbhaya, Sukhi, Akshara Guru Yogena, Swaminarayan Ashrayat. We see that in Mahan Swami Maharaj's life. Through his example, we see that he felt blessed when he came into contact with Yogiji Maharaj. And he felt that peace, that shanti. And we see in Mahan Swami Maharaj that he is the personification of peace and shanti and bliss. And when he's experiencing it himself, it's from his own life, and he's writing this shlok. So he wrote the first shlok and he wrote the last shlok. And specifically, we're focusing on this shlok today, Dhanyosmi, because it's so important to us, because we kind of mechanically say it every day. Mm-hmm. We hear the audio, we hear Dhanyosmi, Purnakamosmi, we hear the mantra, and then we just go into arti. But now I think it's time where maybe we need to reflect on it. Okay, what is Mahan Swami Maharaj actually trying to tell us?
And I guess the more that you think about your fortune, the more that the smaller problems in life, they also kind of go away.
Dissolve.
They dissolve on their own.
It's simple what Mahan Swami Maharaj says, right? What is our prapti like? He says that our prapti is like the Himalayas. And our problems are basically like dirt. It's nothing, right? He says prapti is greater than problems. he writes that equation, right? That prapti is greater than problems. So we are actually very blessed.
And that's why I think the next word,
Purnakamosmi.
Purnakamosmi, is basically I am fulfilled
Yeah.
because of this prapti.
So I think something very interesting, since you said fulfilled, in the Vaishnamut, there's a question that Brahmanand Swami was one of Bhagavan Swaminarayan's Paramahansas, and Bhagavan Swaminarayan refers to him as a yati. He came from a very, himself was very intelligent. He was a great poet, and he was also a very deep thinker. And so in Gajra section 1, number 24 in the Vachanamrut, he asks a question, which is actually, it makes you think that how can a question be so deep? And Brahmanand Swami, he's explaining that suppose there is a person, an individual, whose indriyas, basically your sense organs, are not drawn towards any of the vishays, basically the material pleasures or material objects, right? That same person has no vicious thoughts that arise in his antakaran, in his mind. That means no desires for the world, no thoughts. He doesn't entertain such thoughts, right? So the individual, his sense organs are not drawn towards the material sukh or the material pleasures, worldly pleasures. At the same time, no vicious thoughts arise in that person. And third, that person has absolute faith or conviction in God. So now Brahmanand Swami is saying that there's an individual who has all three. Now you think, this is spiritual enlightenment itself. But the question that follows, it makes you reflect that despite this, though a feeling of unfulfillment remains, and he feels despondent within, what can be the reason for this? Right? So he must have thought very deep about this. And Bhagavan Swaminarayan, in his answer, he says, well, that is also a major deficiency in the devotee. That is despite the fact that his mind has become stable. Like a stable mind is extremely difficult, right? They say that your mind is basically like a flag. A flag never stays still, right? Our mind is constantly, moving, and there's so many thoughts going through our mind. And in fact, Mahan Swami Maharaj even says that all the way, throughout the entire world, no one is actually experiencing peace. Koine shanti nathi. Because there's an unstable mind. So Bhagavan Swaminarayan is saying, despite the fact that the mind has become stable, the fact that that person has firm faith in God, conviction in God, that person still fails to experience profound happiness in his heart. Specifically, that person does not feel that I am extremely fortunate and completely fulfilled, whereas others in the world are constantly being troubled by lust, anger, avarice, infatuation, arrogance, matsar, right? Another form of jealousy, desires and cravings. They are subject to the three types of sufferings day and night. As for me, the incarnate form of Purushottam or God has compassionately revealed his own form to me. He has freed me from lust, anger, and all of the other vicious natures. He has placed me in the company of sadhus, similar to Narad and the Sankadik, like basically the Satpurush, right? Indeed, I am very fortunate, right? So the fact that the person doesn't do that prapti no vichar that Mahan Swami Maharaj has instructed us to do daily, 15 minutes, and that for that reason, the person remains unfulfilled, right? So
as you mentioned, the unstable mind in there, that made me think of this previous episode where Uttam Yogi Swami talks about how Mahan Swami Maharaj talks about કે આપણે પૂજા કરીએ છીએ પણ પૂજા કેવી કરીએ છીએ અને he tells Uttam Yogi Swami કે આપણી puja should be the most delicious moment of our day or life, right? And the reason we don't feel that or don't experience that is because what you just mentioned from that, the unstable mind. While we're doing puja, we're not thinking about the prapti, we're not thinking about the murti, like Bhagwan Shakshat apni puja ma baitha chhe. Like I'm thinking about what I'm doing next, what I need to get going, and just planning my day while I'm doing puja. And hence, that unstable mind that you just spoke about is the reason we don't feel that sukh, that, fulfillment that we're talking about. At least, that's what I take away from it.
I had a sort of a different perspective. I mean, I thought of something else. So, Swami, you mentioned that the entire Satsang Diksha Granth is on peace, how we can attain peace, happiness, bliss. And Purnakam, being fulfilled, I think, is right. It's just about that. And Mahan Swami mentions happiness and bliss separately. And that made me think that being happy is different from being blissful. Mahan Swami is ever blissful. And being fulfilled, I think, is different from being happy. Being fulfilled is an inner sense of like bliss. Once I have attained everything, I have this prapti, and I am assured that maru kalyan, I have nothing left to do.
Content.
I'm content.
There's nothing greater
Greater
to attain.
to
Yeah, I have nothing greater to attain. I think that's different from like achievement. Anything, you don't get that sense from achieving anything or accomplishing, your goals. That comes from the endeavors in Bhagwan Nikrupa, the grace of God, Bhagwan. It reminds me of something from college. A couple of weeks before we were going to graduate, one of my roommates, we were just like sitting in our apartment, and we were just talking. And my roommate, for context, he's one of the most brilliant people I know. He was accepted to, after college, one of the most prestigious PhD programs in the world in his field of study. And when we graduated college, he had to write, in his field of study, he had to write a 50-page thesis of original work. He ended up writing 120 pages because he had that much to talk about, that much in his mind that he wanted to get out. So this is the the level of brilliance that he has. And yet we're sitting there in the apartment that day, and he looks at me, he says, "Dhruv, so what's the point of all of this? Like, why are we? What's the point of life? Why did we come here to study? What are we going to do after?" These are the questions that he's asking me. And without getting too much into the Chad Purusharthas and everything, I tried to explain whatever my understanding was. But that question stuck with me, that he's accomplished a lot, he's achieved a lot, and yet that feeling of fulfillment is not there. And Mansi Maharaj explains to us that feeling of fulfillment comes from doing satsang and following this shastra, this granth. That's what gives us that feeling of fulfillment.
What you just talked about, the fear.
Yes.
Nishpapo, Nirbhaya. Nirbhaya is also like freeing us from the fear of all these different fears that we have in life. And there are many fears that we face. And then I think as a parent, I'm constantly, we're constantly looking out for what the kids are doing, who they associate with. But if you look at it in a larger picture of everything, there's a lot to think about. But the sanity comes in when, we think about the prapti. Okay, you know what? Bapa is with him. Okay, Bapa is going to do the right thing for him and our family. So when we think about it from our perspective, there's a constant fear. But as soon as this thought, like the prapti comes in, okay, Bapa is a part of the process, you feel sane. You actually come down and you feel better. But that's the whole shlok. That's where Swami Maharaj wants us to think about this. We say it as just a routine, but this conversation is actually going to help us realize that what we're consistently repeating, okay, each word has a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
So making us fearless, making us fulfilled. And
I think one of the greatest fears, since you talked about fear, one of the greatest fear for all mankind, for all living beings even, is the fear of death. Right? The thing that we take care of the most is our bodies. Right? And we all know whenever something happens, we go into an illness, whatever, we go get a test done at the hospital, and it's a serious test. We're scared. We're scared for our life, right? And this Satsang Diksha Granth, this satsang, this prapti, attainment of Mansi Maharaj, it allows you to overcome that fear, because we know that when we, Purnakamosmi Maharaj used to say this, Jivta Lakhna ne Maryato Sava Lakhna, meaning we're good if we're here, and if we die, then we're going to go to Bhagwan's Dham, abode, right? And so regardless, we overcome that fear that everyone lives in constantly.
Something that reminds me, I read in an article somewhere. Obviously, it didn't have a context of satsang in it, but it mentioned that in fear and faith, both of these situations, it's something where you have to believe in something that you can't really see. So, and depending on what you decide, that decides your future. So, if you're going to continue to live in fear, you'll end up, living a very feared life. And if you continue to have faith in Bhagwan and and all doership, then you'll be able to have a little bit more, peace and happiness. So.
And it's not putting faith in a God you can't see.
Exactly. So
you're putting faith in Pragat Bhagwan.
Yes.
And God manifests on earth through the Satpurush, right? And that should remove all of our fears. The day-to-day fears. It's not just the ultimate fear, but we have all these little fears throughout life. Will I be successful? well, will I get the job I want, right? All of these little fears that we have. But when we invest our faith in Pragat Bhagwan, right? So all the ultimate, fears of like Janma Maran, like the whole birth, death cycle and going through rebirth, those fears, though he will ultimately get rid of. But as we're also going through life, the day-to-day fears that we do experience, we have that sort of, we can rest back on or lean back on the Satpurush and remove those day-to-day fears that we do have.
So Nirbhaya, so being fearless, it can also be something empowering or encouraging in that way, because if I'm not fearful, Swami, you said that I'm not fearful of these small things that happen in my life. That also means that, say, as a yuvak now, growing up, going through high school, college, there's peer pressure, especially in America. If I am fearless, I have accepted refuge in Bhagavan Swaminarayan and the Akshar Brahm Guru, I am fearless now. I'm not fearful of, say, what someone's going to say of my Tilak Chanlo or of my, of the fact that I do Anik. I'm fearless of that. And I have no fear. I have, almost like asmita almost. Mansanaj says, si santan tawan, we have to become like a lion cub almost. Bhagwan, we're the lion cubs of God. So, we're fearless because we have a refuge in Bhagwan, and that should motivate us to do more and more in our satsang.
And I want to go back to the word before, this Nishpapo, freeing us from our sins. This association, this prapti, it eradicates all the pap that we have either done in the past life. So I want to talk about how is it that we're freed from these sins of the previous birth. And I know we talk about it that Surinu Duk Katama Patijay, right? But we talk about it, it's easy to talk about it, but actually, confirming it or like that we're being freed from it, because we're talking about fear, right? And one of the fear is like Akshardhamnu Sukh Je Aya Marwanuche will be attained.
I think here, in terms of Nishpapo, we feel guilty of the things we've done in the past. Maybe whatever, any wrongdoing or anything wrong or any mistakes we may have made. But the internal agony that we feel or the internal frustration we feel, we can actually approach the Satpurush and we can actually confess to him and tell him, okay, I've made these mistakes. And he's so compassionate, right? And he's so forgiving that when he gives you Ashirwad, you feel free within. You feel that pap go away, right? You've already regretted the mistake that you've made. You're feeling that uneasiness within. But when you confess to the Satpurush, right, to Pragat Bhagwan, and tell him that I've made this mistake, can you please relieve me from this? And he actually relieves us from that internal agony.
Right? It just like how we in this country we have a presidential pardon. No matter what crime you did, if the president pardons you, you're relieved from a sentence. Same at the Satpurush's pardon, right? Whatever paps we've done in our past lives or in this life or currently doing, the Satpurush has the power to pardon us of those sins.
Right. And obviously that's not an excuse to
No, I'm not saying to continue
right?
with paps.
No, I know you're not saying that, right? So obviously we always have to live a righteous life, a dharmic life, and we have to obviously avoid making any mistakes. But whatever mistakes we may have made in the past, the Satpurush can free us from that.
Yeah, I think that's very important, since this is in the Ashray Diksha mantra. So as in we're accepting, we're going into the feet of Bhagavan Swaminarayan and Mansai Maharaj. That's when you realize that, whatever has happened in the past, it's in the past. But now is a time where I accept to live a righteous life and live according to the Satsang Diksha.
Sometimes I think what happens is, because some people feel that, Hubo Papichu, I've committed a lot of mistakes, so that means I'm not suited for satsang, or satsang is not for me, or will I get accepted into satsang? But the Satpurush is such that he has such a broad vision, and he's so compassionate that he will accept us for who we are, as long as we reflect on ourselves. We do that antardashti, that introspection, and we try to improve ourselves. And that's what he's actually looking to see, that you try to step forward, confess what you've done, and try to move forward in life.
It reminds me of the shlok that we sing in Stotra in Shangarati. Sharanagata Papa Parvatam Kanitva Natadiya Sadgunam Anumapyatulam Himanyate Sahajananda Bhaje Sada. And what it means is that if you've done pap equivalent to like a mountain, when Bhagavan, because you come into the ashra Sharanagat, you've taken Sharnu, taken ashra refuge of the Satpurush, so that becomes like a mere pebble, like a speck of dust. And if you and so essentially in this shlok, it feels like it's more on the mema aspect of it. It's not like because of the mema you do sin, but it's not like that at all. But it's the greatness of Bhagavan in the Sant that we've attained. Like Maharaj says in Pratham 37, in the very last part of it, he says, in fact, the darshan of such a true bhakta of God is equivalent to darshan of God himself. He is so great that his darshan alone can redeem countless wretched jeeves. And we know that Grandan Sami and Sami Vatos, he also says something similar. Ke avas sadhune manma sambhare to manna pap badi jai. And a darshan kare to ankhna pap badi jai. Any vato samre to kanna pap badi jai. So that's how it will mema samajwa.
I think that basically means that if you mentally remember the Satpurush, the sins you've committed with your mind, they wash away. Yeah. Doing the darshan of the Satpurush, the sins you've committed with your eyes, they wash away. If you serve the Satpurush, right? And serving the Satpurush doesn't mean that you're personally doing his seva, but any seva that you do in your local mandir or for satsang, then the seva that you do with your hands, the sins that you've committed with your hands, they get washed away. That is the power of the Satpurush. Right?
But now, before we move, so all the sins committed before accepting the Sharanagati, right, of the Satpurush, okay, good. But now, once you've come into satsang, right, there's still moments that we go through in our life where it's not right, but we do it. And wrong is wrong, and that's sin is sin, right? So sometimes people feel like, because I've done this, I don't think I deserve satsang, or I shouldn't come. Like, what's the solution to that? Like, what type of mindset you have? Because once you've come into satsang and yet you still keep doing it, and Baba and Maharaj are ever forgiving. They'll always forgive you, right? But the mind, the human mind, keeps us from wanting to stay in satsang because maybe the guilt within me, or maybe, what the others around me are thinking about me.
I think there's if I'm correct, there's the thought process that we go through in satsang. We have satsang vichars, satsang thoughts. And Swami Maharaj tells us what is the mission of our life, Rajipo, right? So you have to constantly remind yourself, okay, now I've entered satsang. I'm fortunate to have attained this satsang and the Satpurush. Now I have to create that goal that I want to do whatever pleases Bhagavan in the Sant. And obviously, whatever agnas that he's given us, whatever commands he's given us, whether it's our niyam dharma or it's our anik like arti and puja, or going to sabha regularly, right? So in our mind, we should know that I'm here to please him. And then it kind of pushes us back from making those same mistakes over and over again. It's not a overnight process. It's a sadhana. It takes some time. But as we continue to do it and we solidify these thoughts in our mind, then pachi we can move away from repeating those mistakes, right?
I actually read something today in the Prapti Novishar book. It says, there's a quote that Mahansai Maharaj said. He says, any koipan bhul, koipan dosh, meaning any fault, any mistake, any vice, all of those things can be eradicated simply by thinking that how fortunate I am for having attained Mahansai, our guru. And he said that in the thing as well. So
you mentioned about feeling like the feeling of guilt, having that. So I was having the same type of thoughts earlier when we were discussing it, and that's when I realized that having the feelings of guilt is when you live in the past. So I guess when you're fully ready to, commit or come into take refuge in the Satpurush, that's when you'll be able to forget the past. There's a saying in Gujarati that says Jagat Arthi Savar, meaning every morning it's a new day. So you want to forget what has happened in the past. I just came to my mind that that's also something that we need to accept, that when you are in satsang, as you constantly remind yourself that you're here to please Mahansai Maharaj and Bhagavan Samnara, that gives you a refresher that your goal is something different than what it was before.
I think that's where being Nishpapo is really helpful, what we discussed,
to confess
before the Satpurush. in 2023, when Mansi Maharaj was in Toronto, on Prapti Din, we were there. It was Kishore Din Prapti Din. And there we got an opportunity, a couple thousand of us in the tent, to be Nishkapat to Mansi Maharaj while he was there. And so, we had about 30 seconds a minute, just quiet, and we were just all pouring our hearts out to Mansi Maharaj, the mistakes we've made, the regrets we've had. And at the end, speaking to a lot of the people who were there, we all felt unburdened. And there was one person who, after the program, in Prapti Din program, Mansi Maharaj had said that, when you do puja, I am there. Maharaj comes, I come, and I'm there with you. And after that program, someone actually went to the gift shop and bought a puja for the first time. So, being Nishkapat, confessing before the Satpurush, is really, helpful in
So keeping to that thought where you say, okay, Bapa and Maharaj, they're present in our puja, right? So we're talking about being Nishkapat. So sometimes, writing letter to Satpurush is one of the ways, or in person, mulakat, right? Puja is also a way to, do your Nishkapat panu. But when you truly accept the fact that Maharaj and Swami are sitting in front of me and genuinely being Nishkapat, because if you're just doing it as, okay, all right, I'm just going to say it as a prarthana and whatnot, like accepting Sharanagati and then genuinely doing it as if Maharaj is sitting, that's when you feel like, and that we discussed, once we feel free, and when we feel free from that burden of all that's within us, that's when we start experiencing that sukh. But the sukh that we talk about is not just a moment's sukh, it's eternal.
So we said to Dhanyosmi, we've been blessed. Purnakamosmi, we've been fulfilled. Nishpapo, right? So we've been freed from our past sin, and the Satpurush has the power to free us from that sin. Nishpapo Nirbhaya, he's freed us from our day-to-day fears. He's freed us from the fear of Janma Maran, right? And he has guaranteed Akshardham, Moksha, right? So Nishpapo Nirbhaya Sukhi. And ultimately he has made us Sukhi. And I think Sukhi is I can't think our definition of Sukh or our definition of success and Sukh and happiness is, you make a lot of money, you drive a nice car, you have a big house, you're Sukhi. And that's the common, idea of Sukh. But I think Sukh is it's an internal state of happiness. It's not something external, right? And he's given us that internal fulfillment, that internal sukh, right?
So, Sami, I think for that, our definition is very different for happiness nowadays. Especially the way the society has set it up is all of that you mentioned: money, house, and fancy vacations and all that stuff. But I think what we're really habitual to is getting this instant gratification or doing something that gives us this instant happiness, rather than what we talk about. What's talked about in the Satsang Diksha and the Vachanamrita is that whatever Mansi Maharaj says doesn't promise you instantly the gratification, or you don't feel it instantly. It might take a while, depending on how firmly you're able to do it, or how firmly you're able to confess and feel that your feelings of being not burdened anymore, or feeling that of happiness that we wanted to attain. So I think that's something that we should point out.
It's a process.
Yes.
Yeah, I think when it comes to our definition of happiness, we tried, or our happiness is temporary happiness. It's it's got a time limit to it. It could be depending on what the source of happiness is. If it's I ate some nice candy, chocolates, it's a happiness for 10 minutes. I watch a Knicks game, it's a happiness for like 2 hours maybe. I go on a nice vacation, it's a happiness for a week. I get a new car, it might be happiness for about a couple of months. You buy a new house, it's a happiness for a year. You get married, it might be happiness for 5 years, if you're lucky. But the point is, our happiness is limited as a time frame. Mansi Maharaj, the happiness, the sukh he's talking about is eternal. There's no time limit on that, I think, and that's a different kind of happiness, and that's where you feel the fulfillment that we were talking about earlier. Sometimes we don't feel happy because we don't feel fulfilled. Mansi Maharaj ke aaj keche, emma je sukhi keche, and that's it's a blissful happiness, which is eternal throughout our entire life.
There's no limit.
There's no limit to it.
Right. So, barabar. So And then, but how is that achievable? So I think he says, right? Akshar Guru
Yogena.
Yogena Swaminarayan Ashrayat. So like, this is only achievable. How is this achievable? It's only achievable through the Akshabram Guru, right? And so, in fact, Mohan Swami Maharaj, he writes very clearly, right, in the Satsang Diksha, he writes in shloks number 22 to number 25. He says, the first, in this world, Brahm Vidya cannot be fully realized in life without the Brahma Sarup Guru. So the Guru that is Akshar Brahm, right? And without the Akshar Brahm Guru, supreme unwavering conviction in Paramatma cannot be attained, and one's Atma also cannot acquire Brahma Bhav. So you cannot, attain the knowledge of Atma or Paramatma without the Guru, right? And without the Brahma Sarup Guru, perfect devotion also cannot be offered, right? So even if you want to learn the art of bhakti, you want to learn how to offer bhakti to God, you need the Akshar Brahma or Brahma Sarup Guru. And then he also says what we're the subject, right? The first and the last shlok. We're talking about bliss, peace, happiness. He says, without the Brahma Sarup Guru, perfect devotion also cannot be offered. Ultimate bliss cannot be attained. So even you said bliss, this type of happiness, which we call bliss, this sukh is translated into bliss, which has no limit. That ultimate bliss cannot be attained. And the three types of miseries also cannot be eradicated. We don't want to get into all that, like Adhyatmik, Adibodhik, Adidevik. But these are the three types of miseries or suffering that all living, all jeeves, all souls go through this type of janma maran and the dukh that is brought on to them, right? And the Akshar Brahm Guru has the power to remove all that and to give us that ultimate bliss. And so in shlok number 25, Mohan Swami Maharaj writes, therefore, one should always take the refuge. Yeah, look, Dhanyosmi, Purnakamosmi, Nishpapo, Nirbhaya, Sukhi, Akshar Guru Yogena, Samrayan, Ashrayat. Therefore, one should always take the refuge of the manifest Akshar Brahm Guru. So that's important, the manifest, Pragat, living, in living flesh and blood, right? The manifest Akshar Brahm Guru who enables one to attain all objectives and experience Paramatma. Paramatma no sakshat karo, right? To experience the bliss of God, you need the Guru, right? And so, he said, Akshar Guru Yogena, right? Through him, you are taking the refuge of Samrayan Bhagavan.
Shiji Maharaj also presents an analogy in the Vachanamrut that trying to overcome this suffering, all of this, is like trying to overcome all of this without the Pragat Satpurush, is like trying to overcome or trying to cross an ocean without a ship. So basically,
So I think he's saying in regards to Upasana, Bhagwani Upasana. But where do you learn Bhagwani Upasana?
Satpurush.
From the Satpurush. And it's through the Satpurush you're crossing. And we know that all the Upanishad, like the Upanishads, the Mundaka Upanishad, the Katha Upanishad, all these Upanishads, they describe Aksharam as a setu, or as a bridge to cross the ocean of Maya and to attain God. Right?
Yeah, so like in Varta 11 as well, the last sentence, he says the same. He says, okay, therefore, intense love for the Satpurush is the only means to realizing one's Atma. It is the only means to realizing the greatness of the Satpurush. And it is also the only means to having the direct realization of God. And Maharaj, over and over, time in, time out, he says the same thing, that without the Satpurush, without Akshar Brahm, you can't attain Paramatma realization. You can't attain God like that. And in section 336, he says that trying to attain Atma realization and God realization is like trying to stick your tongue out in thin air and trying to taste it, whether it tastes sour or bitter or what. You can't taste it, even if you spend 100 years doing it. Similarly, trying to attain Atma realization without the Satpurush, that's like that. So he says, that's just like a few examples, but throughout the entire Vaishnava, you'll see, and as Swami said in Upanishads, he says the same thing, same exact story, where without Akshar Brahm Guru, you can't attain God realization.
And this principle of refuge in the manifest form of Bhagwan is not new. I mean, we see in the Mahabharata, we see in the Upanishads. In the Mahabharata, Arjun had refuge in Krishna Bhagwan, and so he was fine. But Yudhishthir, his understanding of dharma and righteousness was founded on the Shastras. So he went through a lot of munjo and frustration, right? Yeah. But Arjun didn't have that because after the Gita,
he did have the frustration. Yeah, right. He did feel dejected, but he had Pragat God in front of him.
Yeah.
And he had manifest God in front of him. And we know the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it's the knowledge that Shri Krishna Bhagavan gives to or who imparts to Arjun, right? And so the idea, the concept of Pragat Bhagavan, it's relevant.
Yeah, and in that example, they're explaining dharma and what dharma defined, what its definition is. It says it's not just swadharma, but it's bhagat sarup nishtha. So it means conviction and pratyaksh form of God, the present form of God. And then after he redefined dharma, Maharaj redefined dharma into this by explaining a shlok. And then at the end, he says, these talks are like what? They're like na bhuto na bhavishyati. No one's ever talked about this before. In the thousands of years, people thought dharma just meant swadharma, like your own self-righteousness, like all the rules and regulations of your day-to-day living style and all that. But for the first time, that Maharaj defined it's actually Bhagat Sarup Nishtha, meaning the ashra of refuge of God and his Akshar Brahm Satpurush. So,
and I think in the Gita, right, the shlok about refuge, Sarva Dharma.
Sarva Dharman Pariteja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. That where he says, give up all your manna manila, meaning the dharma that you believe by your mind, the belief of your mind, whatever your mind thinks. Give up all of that and take Sharnagat, take ashra, take refuge of Bhagwan.
Pragat
Bhagwan.
So
I want to bring it down to just us. We're like Mansai Maharaj, this Pragat Satpurush, right? Like a litmus test to he's not just some ordinary human being. Like thinking about Brahmsai Maharaj, he built over like 1,300 different mandirs, and not just like built them, he's put an input into them and given time. On top of it, written countless hundreds and thousands of letters for anywhere from age of 4 or 5 to all the way to Vruddhavastha, like elderly. And he's able to answer every individual's question. And not only that, like he met over millions of people in person and connected with them. So I don't think any ordinary human being can do such level of, commitment or activity. And that in itself, I think, is a litmus test that, Bapa is the Pragat Satpurush.
I think, no, I agree with you, Bhavya Bhai, but Satpurush, Akshar Brahm Satpurush, Karya Gamete Kar. Bhagat Ji Maharaj didn't build any mandirs, but he was still Akshar Brahm. And every Satpurush takes on a different personality, a different style, but they're still the Pragat Satpurush. એટલે એમાં પણ Mansai Maharaj કે his greatest, or કે એ શુદ્ધ છે, pure. He's the purest vessel to Bhagwan.
I think that the greatest work and the only work that the Satpurush has come down on earth for is what Gunatan Swami says in his Vat. Gunatan Swami says in his spiritual teachings, the Swamini Vato, he says કે અમને તો એક જન્મ મરણ રોગ ટાળતા આવડે છે, બીજું કાંઈ આવડતું નથી. The only thing we know how to do is to remove the disease of birth and death. And Pramukh Swami used to say કે આ ભયંકરમાં ભયંકર રોગ છે. And it's ભયંકરમાં ભયંકર દુઃખ છે. Right? And that's what the Satpurush has come down on earth for. His only one goal in his life is to give you moksha. There is no other intent that he has in his life, or no other objective that he has in his life, right? And everything else that we do in satsang, whatever he does, is a means to attain that moksha, right? And I think if you separate the word, it's mo no shay, right? So mo is that ignorance that we have within us. So it's not just moksha after we leave this body and we go to Akshardham, right? But even that, to remove that ignorance from within our hearts, the ignorance of anger, greed, ego, jealousy, attachments, aham mamatva, right? All of these inner vices that become a cause for janma maran, right? He frees us from that. He liberates us from that. And that's what he's come down on earth for, right? And so he frees us from that. And they say that when our swabhavas take over, meaning every time we experience the negative effects of the swabhavas, our inner vices, we feel unhappiness. We feel miserable. We feel that frustration, that mundran. But when you're released from that, or when you are liberated from that, when he frees you from that, you start experiencing that bliss. And so Mansai Maharaj's only goal, right? So if you say the Satsang Diksha, you can say it's a manual to moksha, He wants to give you that ultimate bliss. Not just after you leave this body, but while you're here on this earth, right? We have Pragat Bhagan, the God you want to see in Akshardham. He's present on this earth through the Satpurush. So he wants to give us that bliss, that happiness while we're living on this earth. And that's why this Satsang Diksha has been written. And if we actually try to follow the Satsang Diksha, we've already been blessed with it. Right? But now if we actually try to follow it, then what happens is that we start experiencing that bliss and that happiness that he wants us to feel.
Yeah, and in our satsang, we see so many people that have attained this state as well. Like if you look at our senior santos,
The Sadguru
Santos, Kothari Bapa, we all had his Samagam Lab here and throughout North America recently. And you see that he lives a life of purity. He does exactly all the things that we talked about. In the Satsang Diksha. You look at his way he reads every day, how much time he spends in reading, like all those things. When you look at it, you see this state is possible to attain.
It all ties back to the last two words of this shlok, Swaminarayan Ashrayat, that this is, I am blessed, I am fulfilled through the association of the Akshar Brahm Guru with because of the refuge in Bhagavan Swaminarayan. And that's how I think, our Sadguru Santo have attained that level, that sthiti,
spiritual state.
And to add to that, like we've taken his refuge, and once we have taken his refuge, look at the greatness of him and the. You're right, like his greatness isn't through karya; it's that he doesn't give up on us. We give up, but he doesn't give up. So like sometimes I'll falter in my niyam or in just doing my satsang on a routine, but look at his greatness that he, no matter what, still makes it a point to do his vicharan so that he can give as much love, as much time to his Hari Bhaktas. And like the time he took to do the Satsang Diksha, he was still doing his routine like Satsang Karya and everything. But during his Aram time, he would take his time to write this and he'd follow up. And not just that, he actually reached out to all the senior santos like, hey, this is my icha. Like he's also showing his greatness through being nirmani.
And I think Amake Ushake, Mon Samaj has mentioned many times, right? Satpurush ma niswart prem cha, unconditional love, right? And so he's expressing that through this. You just said that he doesn't give up on us, and he accepts us for who we are. He accepts us for who we are, and he wants to see us progress, right? So
Yeah, I agree. I think he wants us to be happy. We, like you were mentioning earlier, we live we've been trained or programmed to look for instant gratification. We're all Gujarati, so we all look for a deal. So satsang jivta karwano, like do satsang while you're alive, and the benefit is after death. Nah, yun na chale. I want to do satsang now, and I want to experience that Akshardham Sukh now as well. We don't need to wait to go to Dham in order to experience Akshardham Sukh. But in order to do that, you have to understand the Satpurush. You have to have that Jordan. Khare karo ashro. That means you have to follow his agna. Live according to his wishes. We can't say I have his ashro, but I don't do anything he tells me to do, or I don't follow any of his niyams. Then we're just, we're lying to ourselves. I
think what is that? Karyani 11, right?
Yeah.
So Priyatamni Marji.
Huh.
So what's the true character of affection is if you follow his marji, you follow his agna, right? And actually someone recently said, Man Saimaji started adding prapti and everything. And now, like before Arti, like we have to do this, listen to this prapti no vichar, and then we have to say this mantra, Dhanyosmi, Purnakamosmi. But there's a deep meaning behind why he's making us say it and recite it and think about it before we do Arti. So it's very important.